Hey guys, welcome back to Ripe Stories. In this video, a Karen neighbor repeatedly drove through my garden and destroyed my hedge with her car. I then ended up installing a trap and she made a huge mistake. Let's dive right into the video to find out what happened. And the title story starts like this. So to start things off, I like to garden. Nothing too fancy really, though my dream would be to do professional layouts for new yards. I just like the feeling of making something beautiful that wouldn't look the same if someone else did it, you know? Well, anyway, I live in a suburban area and I'm lucky enough to be in a very safe one too. The schools are nice, the crime rate is low, and until this story, I could not name any enemies I had made in the 5-ish years I've been here. Recently, there were a few complaints about cars speeding too fast near the entrance of the neighborhood where I live, so they decided to put in a speed bump. It's nothing noticeable really. For a speed bump, it's pretty close to the ground. I guess it's just a scare factor they are going for, and so far it worked just fine. I actually rarely see people going over 35 and hopefully that gave passers-by the chance to see my garden. It was summer when this happened, so everything I planted was in full bloom. I had trimmed the hedges, planted small flowers around the base of my trees, and just mowed the crisp green grass that covered the lawn. I say all this because to my utter horror, I came outside to see large tire marks running through the grass, tearing up a piece of the lawn and some of it even going through the hedge. Obviously, I was confused. It was definitely a car that did it, but I didn't see any reason for them to pick my yard to ruin. Yes, most of it was salvageable, but I was very tense and stressed at that moment, so I went on the hunt fast. I asked a few neighbors if they saw who did it, and they did not have any answers, but agreed it was a crazy thing for someone to do. Just in case it got worse and I needed to report it somewhere, I took plenty of pictures. I then remembered that my doorbell had a built-in camera and would have caught what happened, so I decided to check it. I scanned through the time it was picking up things, and I finally found it happened so fast I had to slow it down to even see it. So from what I could gather at the time, it was a blue CRV that turned a corner, zoomed down the street at least 20 miles over the limit, saw the speed bump and then decided to run over my yard to avoid hitting it. I was in disbelief that someone would do that, but I stupidly gave them the benefit of the doubt that it was a mistake and they were just trying to avoid crashing their car, even though it probably would have been fine if she hit the bump. I also figured that it was just some drunk guy who was visiting, just a one-time thing I could learn to get over. Well, unfortunately, I was wrong. The next day, I just happened to be reading on my porch around the same time the car had driven through my yard yesterday. It's a hobby I'm pretty proud of, especially when my plants are in full bloom and I can use them for shade when I read. I was on the edge of the porch closest to the hedge planted on the border of my yard when suddenly I heard a car that sounded way too loud to be going the speed limit. To my horror, it only slowed down slightly when it reached my yard and drove right through a piece of my hedge, digging into the marks from yesterday. I was furious. I sprinted to the car that was now struggling to get back onto the street and knocked on the driver's window. Instead of just rolling the window down like a normal person, the driver decided to just honk at me, staring me down like she was gonna kill me. I was completely terrified, almost expecting her to try and run me over too. Even though with more knocking, I was able to get her to roll down the window. Before I could even get a word out, Karen, not her real name, started yelling at me. Actually, she was yelling about a lot of things, and the yard was not even the first topic. She started going off about how crappy this neighborhood was to not have her accommodations and that I should be ashamed of myself for her treatment. No, she never clarified what that meant. It sounded like a rant from someone with some memory issues, but she didn't look older than 50, so I didn't think she was senile or anything. Eventually she got to yelling about the speed bump. She mentioned how it was a completely unconsensual decision that as a member of the neighborhood, she should have a say in it being put in. Not only was I panicked about realizing that she had been living in my neighborhood this whole time, but I felt like I was disassociating when she was explaining her issues with it. Karen said something about how a speed bump is a violation of her human rights and that she had no choice but to use my yard to get around it. She never gave an excuse as to why she couldn't just slow down and go over the bump like a normal person, but at this point, if she gave me any excuse, I was not gonna buy it. I firmly told her what she was doing was not only illegal in terms of trespassing, but it was also incredibly dangerous since she was going way too fast, and with the hedge in the way, she could have hit me and would have never known it. I tried to stay calm when people pissed me off. I usually try not to form enemies for my own good if nothing else, but here I was only barely holding back when explaining to her that if it happened again, she was gonna be sorry. Cursing me out one more time, she drove away, slamming on the gas and nearly running over my foot. I was not gonna let that slide. I knew she was gonna do it again, and that if I didn't find some way to fight back, I was never gonna have my garden the same way again. I drove to the store and picked up a spike strip. It felt almost surreal to have to go this length for something as simple as keeping cars off my yard, but there I was. To make sure she wouldn't see them, I installed them underneath the hedge. I put a lot of effort into making sure they were perfectly placed, and if she was hit, it would ruin her tires. Also, for my own safety, I made sure that every spike stayed within my lot. There was nothing she could do to me if she tried to flip this story in her favor, but I knew she would try it, and I couldn't wait to see what she had in store for tomorrow. The next day, same time, I stayed inside and watched through the window. Now that I think about it, I probably looked insane just staring at the street for minutes straight. It was so thrilling to hear her car come down the road once again though. This time, however, when she tried to retrace her steps over the same part of my yard, her left set of tires instantly popped from the spikes. The sound was so exciting to hear. I heard her start honking like a maniac before she turned the car off and stormed up my porch. It sounded like she was punching my door and demanding me to come out, or else she would be coming in. Mentally preparing myself, I opened the door. She just kept screaming. That's it. She cursed my family, my lawn, just everything. Within the first minute of me explaining that this would have never happened if she just listened to me, she threatened to call the cops on me. I had no problem with that threat. Not only was this whole thing started by her actually, but there was absolutely no aspect of this story that did not have evidence. I told her to go ahead and call the cops, even though it would be a complete waste of time, and closed the door. Well, as expected, the cops showed up pretty quickly. By the time they got there, she had completely broken down into a sob and it looked super fake. I think she even put on some extra mascara so it would look even worse, but she just ended up looking like a clown. She was an incoherent mess when she tried to explain to the officers what happened, and I just awkwardly stayed on the porch listening to their conversation. While they were asking questions, I got to get a better look at her car. So it turns out when she hit the spikes, the front tire had skidded and threw her back onto the road, which caused even more damage, namely some big dents towards the bottom of the doors. I hate to say it, but it was pretty satisfying to look at. I feel bad for the cops though. They were clearly just trying to do their job and help Karen, but she was prioritizing a good show over an actual reason for them to arrest me. She dramatically showed them the weapon I had installed under the fence to try and trap her, and said that I was probably some repeat offender who did the same thing to other women. Don't know when she came up with that part of the story, but it was crazy to hear her say that. I actually tried to remain calm and not laugh, especially since I was getting nervous that they were just gonna take me to the station if the accusation was serious enough, but luckily they gave me a chance to give my side of the story. The first thing I did was show that the spikes were completely legal to own. I had the receipt and model that showed how and when I was allowed to use them, and especially since they never left my property, I was completely allowed to put them up. Then I showed them the obvious track marks that were left in the yard. I explained how this was not the first or second time Karen had done something like this, and I was happy to show them the footage of her speeding down the road, slowing a tiny bit down before my yard and then driving over it to avoid the speed bump. The cops looked over the evidence, but within a minute they determined me to be completely harmless and that Karen was in the wrong. All things considered, she got off way too easy. She was charged later with speeding, destruction of property, and giving a false report to a police officer, and they determined that she was responsible for my yard's damage and would need to pay me a fine to have it fixed. Yes, I was happy with the outcome, but someone like her is never gonna learn from giving out a few dollars. If her appearance and car were any indication, she had plenty of money. She knew not to bother me anymore, which was the main concern. It would have been pretty cool to see her rebuilding my garden as punishment or something, but well, a guy can dream. And the next one is a super satisfying petty revenge story that you don't want to miss. And by the way, if you enjoy my videos, please don't forget to press the like button, because that helps me tremendously. This one is titled, "Old Guy at the State Fair Yelled at a Little Girl for Standing in Front of the Butter Sculpture, so I Took Revenge for Her." This happened last summer. Like the title says, I was at the state fair looking at the butter sculpture. This old dude is standing next to me recording as it spins around because the sculpture had two different sides to it. This little girl, maybe 3 if I had to guess, runs up to it and presses her face and hands against the glass, all excited. I laughed because I found it cute. I remember being young and that excited for silly things, but the old dude next to me immediately started complaining. Specifically, he said, "Jesus Christ, get out of the way!" And keep in mind, this girl is not even tall enough to mess with his precious video. If anything, he should have been happy to catch a genuine state fair moment. But nope, apparently in his mind, he deserves to get a completely uninterrupted video. The mom awkwardly apologized and pulled her daughter back. I was immediately effing livid though. As soon as it got to the point that the butter sculpture was turning to the side he hadn't recorded, I slowly walked in front of him and past his camera so that I blocked all the important stuff. As I was walking away, he goes, "You're a real a-hole, you know that?" And I shot back, "Dude, what does that make you? You yelled at a little girl because you need your video that bad." He huffed and puffed and goes, "Well, you're still an a-hole." I just laughed and kept walking away at that point. Made eye contact with the mom before I left though. She had a huge smile on her face, gave me a nod and mouthed, "Thank you." One of the most satisfying moments of my life, honestly. And the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. And by the way, if you've enjoyed the video so far, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because it helps me tremendously. So the next one is titled, Am I the A-hole for telling my boyfriend that my dad was dead? I, 26 female, lost my mom to cancer when I was 8, and I've always had an absent father. I only found out who he was when I was 13, and even then he didn't want custody of me, forcing me to stay in the foster system until I was 18. Over my whole life, I've had about 5 conversations with him, give or take. He's like a stranger to me. He appears once in a blue moon to ask for money or something along those lines. It does not really bother me anymore. I've just learned to accept it now, but I don't like talking about it, so to avoid that conversation with people, I usually just say both my parents are dead. This leads me to a year and a half ago when I just started dating my boyfriend, 25 male, and like usual I had just told him that my parents were dead, but the other day my dad showed up at my door. I still don't know how he knows where I live and asked for $100, except my boyfriend was there and he obviously found out that my dad was not actually dead. This led to a long conversation with him that night where I explained the whole situation. So he said this was a breach of trust between us since I lied about my dad and that he needed some space to rethink our relationship, but he does not think that he will leave me. I feel so bad and I should have told him earlier, but I'm gonna be honest, I just didn't think. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know what you think about this one. Do you think OP was being the a-hole here or not? Update to the story, so my boyfriend texted me 5 minutes ago asking to talk, so we are gonna have a full in-depth conversation tomorrow after work and I'll update again. Update, so before I get to the update, I would like to clear some things up. I've only given money to my dad once when I was still desperate for his love and acceptance, but he did not get any money this time. Number 2, despite his confusion, my boyfriend stepped in to defend me and get my dad to leave, and it was only after my dad left that he asked me about it. Onto the update, my boyfriend told me that all the sudden information along with the knowledge I hadn't told him the truth was very overwhelming and he just needed some space to not say the wrong thing. He also said that he got why I lied initially, and he wasn't mad that I lied, more hurt that I felt like I couldn't tell him about it. He also mentioned that he couldn't be there for me if he didn't know what was going on. The conversation ended in tears, and it's the most vulnerable I've been in front of someone. He was very understanding, and we've decided to draw a line in the sand and start again, if that makes sense. I've also looked into therapy for my childhood trauma, and all in all, I'm using this as an opportunity to better myself and heal fully. And the next one is titled, Nurses Only, Alright. Sitting in my wife's hospital room, and a nurse asked if there was anything she could get me. I had a bit of a tickle in my throat and I was thirsty, so I asked for something carbonated. She brought me ginger ale. Great, problem solved. Next shift, nurse asked the same question and I asked for a ginger ale. She bought me a ginger ale with no problem. Next shift, no problem. Then things get interesting. Morning shift comes in. This nurse asks the same question. I asked for a ginger ale. She told me those are for patients only. I had to go get my own. So I Instacarted a ginger ale along with a few other things with instructions to deliver to the room. They were taking my wife away to surgery and the Instacart shows up at the same time. He asks if anyone ordered groceries. I waved my hand up and asked him to leave it in the room. The nurse exclaimed, "You cannot do that." I told her, "You told me I had to get my own." So I did. The sheer look of her head blowing a gasket was priceless. I really do love nurses. They are more important than the doctors in my opinion. Patients have the most contact with them. I even keep treats in the room just for nurses. I've never met a nurse as militant or controlling or as much of a sheer BTH as this one. So I took a bit of pleasure here. What she didn't know is that I was a patient in this hospital for 3.5 weeks back in January. I Instacarted and DoorDashed orders with no problem. I could only eat so much hospital food. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I own a very large plot of farmland in an area that had been rural for a very long time. For some reason lately, a bunch of people have been moving into the area and trying to make it more suburban. It is not really working, and what we have is a weird hybrid of people who think they are important and have money living in a rural area and trying to pretend like they aren't. I have no idea if I missed like a trend or some planet going crazy, because this happened all within a couple of years out of the blue. Now, most of these people don't need a story about them because they are just generically crappy people. Karen, on the other hand, crossed the line of being entitled, so she gets her very own story to be online forever. Backing up a little bit, Karen moved into a smaller plot of land with her huge family. Don't ask me how many people actually live on the property, because it seems like people come and go all the time. I cannot keep track of how many people legally live on that land, but for sure, Karen lives on the land with her husband and at least 8 kids. Kids being used as stretch because a couple of them are old enough to be married and have their own kids who also might live on the property. Again, very hard to tell. Finally, I find other people that I believe are aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. that always seem to be around as well. There's nothing wrong with a big family at all. In fact, in rural areas like this, having a lot of kids can mean more farmhands to help with chores. The issue was that they didn't have nearly enough space for the number of people trying to fit on this property. And because of this, Karen told any of her family members that come to just park their car on my property so theirs would be less crowded and cluttered. I was not asked if this could happen, and you can be sure that I was not happy about it either. Cars driving all over my land can ruin it for one, and for another, it's my private property. When it is 1 or 2, I might just get a little bit annoyed and want to go tell the people not to park there. When Karen throws a party though, it can mean up to 12 cars randomly parked all over my property with their drivers too drunk to do anything. After one party I went to go and have a talk with Karen. Me, "Excuse me ma'am, I was hoping I could have a word with you about the cars being parked on my grass." Karen, "Ew, you smell like manure and sweat. Don't you think a shower is called for before talking to somebody above you?" Me, "Above me? That's a little presumptuous." Karen, "Wow, you even know a big word. I'm so impressed." Sarcastic, obviously. "What is wrong with my car anyway?" Me, "You keep having people park on my property. I want it to stop or I'll have to start getting the police and towing company involved." Karen, "That area is fine for them to park in. I'm the owner and say it's fine." Me, "You only own to the fence. On the other side the land is mine." Karen, "Don't pretend like you actually own land. You are probably just working for $1 an hour and sending the money back to your family." Now might be a good time to point out that I'm Hispanic and now racism is checked off the Karen bingo card. I warn her again that I do own the land, and this is her one and only warning to stay off of my land with the cars. You can imagine that since she does not even believe that I own the land, she does not listen to a single word I say. A week later she has another party and I waste no time calling a towing company explaining that there are a dozen illegally parked cars on my property. I figured after 1 or 2 people getting towed, people would start running out in a panic. However, it was not until the 9th car being towed away that Karen got alerted to what was going on and started yelling and cursing at me. I told her that I warned her what would happen and she only had herself to blame. Her family could also only blame her because she let them park illegally knowing that they could get towed away. All 12 cars did get taken since nobody was sober enough to move them. Karen was pissed at me and the next day screamed that she was gonna sue me and take every last acre of my land. The war was now on and she did not know who she was getting into the ring with. Her lawsuit was horrible and revolved less around the actual facts and more about me not owning the land and being in the country illegally. Proving I was born here? Easy. Proving the land was mine? Even easier. When it came to the actual point of the cars, no lawyer was gonna help her take me to court because it was a losing battle. She could not sue me for no reason, but I did not let things just nicely stop there. Karen had started a war and I was not gonna let her relax for one moment after what she pulled. I enjoyed my breakfast with a piping hot side of revenge, and that was exactly what was coming for Karen. I had a feeling the parking issue was not gonna stop, so I decided to set a trap on my property. Spikes that hid in the grass and at night would be impossible to see or notice until all your tires got blown out. Also perfectly legal, since my land, and my reasoning was if a car came fast into my land it could harm my animals. 4 cars got popped tires and Karen called the cops on me for damaging her family's cars. I stood there and made the police ask them why they parked on a yard that had no trespassing and even danger do not enter signs. Karen again claimed it was her land and I was just a worker, despite me having court records to show the police. I was asked if I wanted the cars removed from my property and I told the officers that I did. Karen was furious and I think family realized that she was not gonna beat me if she kept this going on. Cars stopped being parked on my land and I made sure to keep the spikes up just in case. I think at one point she tried to remove them or have one of her kids remove them. This is because I heard a yelp of pain over there and nothing else could have hurt them. I guess they thought I would be dumb enough to not place them properly or something. I do have to be careful over there now, but it was more than worth it to get my revenge on Karen. I may have also made an anonymous tip to the police about strange-looking people coming and going all hours of the night. That got her entire property searched, which was also very entertaining for me. And before we end the video, we will read one last funny story from r/petty revenge. It is titled "The Completely Illegal Way to Mess with Someone's Food." So I work in a cafeteria in a factory, so almost all my customers are regulars and I get to know what they like and don't like. There's one woman on nights who absolutely hates peas and won't even try to eat around them. She loves any kind of chicken soup though and is always a little upset if there are peas in it. Last week we had chicken soup with no peas, but she still got mad because we had the noodles for it on the side so they wouldn't turn to mush in the soup. This is basically how we do noodle soups. You just add the noodles to your bowl and then you add the soup. Well, anyway, today we have chicken and wild rice soup, which I know she is crazy for. I had to add to it, take sure that we will have enough for midnights. I don't have time to chop up carrots like the guys on days. Guess I will just have to use the frozen peas and carrots. Oh well, cannot really cater to one person while serving 100. So, no soup for you. And yeah guys, you could say the lady is gonna be peased off. You simply cannot appease everyone. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. Enough with the puns, I will see you again tomorrow.